Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Mind of Sai Marie. Today, we aren't just talking about addiction in theory. We're talking about the mechanics of grace, the intentional choices, and the hard boundaries required to stay grounded when your world is falling apart. S.E. Tschritter is a multi award winning author, a truth teller, and a student of human resilience. She joins us to unpack how we can reclaim our identities, from the unexampled sacrifices we make for those we love. S.E., it's a pleasure to have you in the studio here today. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Sai, for having me. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here.
Awesome. So you talk about intentional choice making in your healing journey. Why do so many spouses of addicts live on autopilot? And what is the cost of not being the primary architect of your own decisions during that chaos?
Autopilot because it's survival mode for spouses of addicts. And I would say even children of addicts or parents of addicts, whoever is living in the house with an addict, it creates this chaos that you just have to survive. And there's not a lot of time to pause or reflect or think about what's going to happen next. You just have to make it from one moment to the next. So I think that's a lot of it. And it's hard just like from my own point of view. I remember I was dealing with so many different things. In my own case, he had a cancer diagnosis on top of the addiction. So it was chicken little, the sky is falling, the sky is falling. Everyone was screaming, cancer, cancer, cancer. And I was like, wait, hold on a second. He lied to me and his choices affected me. I didn't have a say in the fact that we lost money, in the court fees or the totaled car and having to go buy a new vehicle. And he wasn't able to drive. His driver's license was taken away. So then if he wanted to get to work, I had to drive him. And I remember this one moment where he was saying, Sam, if you don't want to drive me, I'll just drive to work without a driver's license. And my gut reaction was, heck no, you're not, because that's what got us into trouble in the first place, was not obeying these traffic laws. It gave me pity and grace then for people who go through that, though, because when your choices are taken away, but you still have to live and you still have to go to the grocery store and things like that, you find yourself maybe driving without a driver's license in that case. But anyway, I drove him to work that day because I didn't want us to get in even more trouble. But that was something that I resented him for too, having to do all these extra things to take care of him when it wasn't my choice that led to the drunk driving accident and all the subsequent charges.
So, obviously, with those kind of deep situations and that kind of chaos unfolding, you've seen how unexamined sacrifices shape mental health. What is a sacrifice people think is noble in a marriage, but is actually toxic to their identity?
Enabling 100%. You think you're trying to help, you think you're protecting them by not saying something to family right away. I protected Clint in the beginning of our marriage because he relapsed within the first few months of our marriage. And he didn't have enough collateral, enough grace points with my family. They all would have said, divorce him, end the marriage, get out of that right now. So I didn't tell my family what I was going through right away because I was trying to protect him and trying to make the marriage work, trying to do all these things. And I think there's a fine line between loving the way, giving grace when an addict needs it, and not enabling them to continue making those poor choices.
So, we often define ourselves by our roles: author, mother, wife. How did you start to separate your identity from the roles you played during your husband's battle with addiction?
I lost myself. Honestly, I didn't have an identity. That was part of my struggle. I was taking on all the things. I was an author at the time too. So I considered myself an author and a mother and a wife. And I was almost his production manager. It wasn't production, but just trying to manage our home, trying to manage the job. So the situation was he was a pastor at the time and he got in a drunk driving accident on a Saturday night. And the next day, he was arrested with a felony charge of fleeing police. So before he could go back into the pulpit, there were certain things he had to do. And the church was begging for him to come back, which was amazing. However, there were certain things that had to happen first. And so I was making calls to the district superintendent and the bishop of the United Methodist Church, updating him on the situations that were going on. I was trying to take care of our finances. I was talking to the lawyer and a legal advisor to try to figure out all those different things. So Sam got lost in all of that. And when my late husband passed away, he was diagnosed in September, October of 2017, and he lived 20 months diagnosis to death. So when he died in June of 2019 from cancer, I spent, I would say, almost 2 years in an identity crisis trying to figure out who Sam was apart from all the trauma and all the grief and even my identity as his spouse too, because that was wrapped up in there as well. So I faced a huge identity crisis during that time.
I commend you for your strength. That sounds like that was a heavy burden to carry.
Thank you.
Obviously, you've had a successful career as an author and a thought leader. How has your understanding of resilience changed since that 1:30 a.m. phone call?
1 minute at a time. I have a friend named Amabel who is from Mexico City, and she taught me the Spanish phrase poco a poco, little by little. And I say that a lot to myself, or I've said that a lot to myself since he passed. Poco a poco, little by little, get up. And I made small goals for myself at the time. Brush my teeth, take a shower. I lowered my standards of what I expected for myself, and I gave myself grace to be imperfect. And I think resilience means you can withstand the storm, but you also have to allow yourself space to be something different and something less in some ways so that you can grow through the struggles because grief takes up a ton of room in your life, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, in all the ways, physically too.
Absolutely true. You've obviously navigated your own hard seasons. What was the most important thing you learned about yourself when things weren't going according to plan?
That is a hard one because I would get really frustrated with myself if I couldn't be perfect. I was really hard on myself. I was really hard on myself when there were days in the summer where I would forget to feed my children. And I know that sounds crazy. They were old enough. They were old enough. They were 8, 7, and 4 when my late husband passed away. So they were old enough to rummage through cupboards and get cereal and snacks and things like that on their own. But there were days where it would be 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And I was like, oh my gosh, I haven't given them breakfast or lunch yet. And I was doing my best, but I still felt like a failure in a lot of ways. My kids survived. They're okay, but I felt like a failure, and that was really tough on me. So having to give myself, like I said earlier, grace and space to be imperfect was really important. That was a very important lesson I had to teach myself.
I commend you for the strength that you have to tell us this today. So,
Thank you.
for the listener currently overloaded and losing their sense of self in someone else's addiction or chaos, whatever toxic dynamic and situations that are adding to that, what is one small win they can claim right now?
If it's possible at all, get away for a minute. I spent a weekend at a friend's house, and it was costly, not financially, but to try to set up the babysitting and the meals for my husband so that he wasn't having to work and make meals for the kids. My mom came and watched the kids, but I got away for 3 days in the midst of all of the craziness. I went away for 3 days and I had people judging me for that. How can you leave your husband during this time? I can't believe you did that. But it saved my marriage and it saved me. It saved my soul because I was able to think through process all of the grief, all of the trauma. Not all, I mean, you don't do it all in one weekend, but I got a huge head start on letting my own voice talk to me rather than the bishop and the district superintendent and my husband and my mom and his mom and the church members. All these different people had ideas about what I should be doing and how I should be helping my husband. But no one had really great ideas for how I should be helping me. And in order to support my family, in order to support my husband and the things he was going through, I had to be okay too. I had to put on my own oxygen mask. A lot of people have heard that analogy before. When you're on a plane, you have to put your oxygen mask on before you can put your child's mask on. Because if you run out of air, you're not going to be able to get your mask on your child, right? That's the whole point of that. And so I had to go away and I had to breathe. And if I could give anyone any advice, I would say do whatever you can to create space for yourself to just be and exist without anyone else telling you what to think.
I absolutely agree with that. That's some great advice. Essie, thank you for reminding us that our lives are a series of choices and that we do have the power to change the narrative at any time. This has been a grounded and insightful conversation, and I really appreciate your wisdom sharing today.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me on the show. I appreciate it.
All right, to everyone listening, look at where you might be making some unexamined sacrifices in your own life today. You can pick up The Prodigal Son and more of Essie's work at loveunited.com, and that will be in the show description notes to make it easy for you to click on the link and go over there and see it. So there's really no excuse not to. And go pick up her book so you can see what she's got to share with us in her own words and really get deeper understanding of this very important message. That
And
said,
when people go to loveunedited.com, if they join the newsletter, they can also download the first 3 chapters of The Prodigal Son.
that is amazing. So get over there and do that. In the meantime, remember, the mind is the most important story we'll ever tell. And as always, thank you for listening to the Mind of Sai Marie.